You tell me when you're on.
Already?
Huh?
Already.
Right now?
We're on. Yeah.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. I was asked to just share you some of the memories and some of the experiences we had. We just came back from Israel last week from Eretz Yisrael, from the Knesset Shluchim. Really, up here with me should have been a whole panel. I have two sons-in-law who were also on campus who were there also, Shlomo Silverman and Shmuel Rothstein. But Shmuel is out of town, and Shlomo, I think he's out. He just came back into town. He was out of town. So I'm here sort of representing everybody. And this is my experience, with what happened. There are others that might, have had other inspirational moments that might have been what touched them. But it was quite an impactful trip. And so I just wanted to share with you some of that. Everybody can hear me, right? Okay. So first of all, this was a Knesset Shluchim, and especially for campus. Normally, the men's and women's Knesset Shluchim for campus, which happens in the summer after the semester is over, usually happens in New Jersey. But Hashgacha Pratis, and because of October 7th, the decision of the organizers was that we had to do it in Israel. And so the plans changed. The women's happened a few days after Lag BaOmer in Israel, and ours, the men's, was the day after Gimel Tammuz. And so for most people, that meant going to Crown Heights and for bringing there. And they had a whole program for the Kinnis, sort of a pre-Kinnis events. And they also had big buses to take them all to the airport to get on the airplanes and fly to Israel. I wasn't a part of that part of it. I was in Crown Heights for the very beginning of Gimel Tammuz, but I felt that I just needed an extra night's sleep before everything started. So I actually flew earlier. And I didn't realize, but the organizers, found out everybody's schedules, and they gave me they shot me a text saying, "Hey, I hear you're going early. We're thinking of going to see Bibi Netanyahu early Wednesday morning to start off the Kinnis. Everyone wants to be going wherever the first stop is. Would you like to join us to be a part of going to see Netanyahu?" I said, "Of course, sure." So that morning, Wednesday morning, and everyone else got on a bus that started in Kfar and we were based in Yerushalayim. And we got on a minibus and went to the prime minister's office. And that was, to go to any kind of, international leader for Kollel is a very special thing and cool to be, in Israel, be there with Bibi Netanyahu speaking to us. That was also, made it even more special. The experience there, we got there, and security, it's like, going to TSA on steroids. They had to check every single thing about you. I had to turn in my passport, and they held onto it for a long time. I don't know what they ran checks on, but everyone, had to turn in their passports and be checked. And then going through the metal detector was not just simply going through, you say take off your belt in certain airports. They took the belt off and felt every single inch of the belt just to make sure there was nothing hiding in that belt. I had to take out my wallet, and they said, in front of me, they pulled out all my credit cards and all the money and everything, and they had to feel and check my entire wallet to make sure there was nothing in that wallet. This is the level of security. We, of course, weren't allowed to have cell phones or anything in the meeting. But what happened was we were led to his conference room, and there are about, I want to say there was something like 20 to 30 of us. About 2/3 of us, I guess, were from all around the world, and the other third were Israeli campus shluchim. And so we were all sitting around this big oval, conference table, and the Netanyahu seat was, in the long ways, he would be sitting right in the middle, facing. So he came in the room this way, and this made a circle around the table to come in, and I just, not knowing any better or whatever, I happened to be sitting right there near the end. I guess people have seen the videos already. But so he walked right past, and I was able to shake his hand, and everybody's taking the pictures. And my son, who's like on all this stuff, he immediately shot out a meme saying, word has it that Netanyahu agreed to come to the University of Pittsburgh for a special Shabbaton. It's all fake news, but he enjoyed spreading those kinds of words, and he got him in trouble a little bit. People were started contacting him like, "Are you kidding me? When is it?" No, it didn't happen. But I mean, as far as actually speaking to me, the only time I ever had a verbal communication with him, at the very beginning, he asked everyone around the room to say who they were and where they were from. So I just told him, who I was and from Pittsburgh. The meeting, again, there's the snippets of that are on a video that can be found, but basically just briefly what happened in that meeting, aside from the photo op, was that the head of the Chabad on campus in Israel got up and read like a proclamation, sort of a post-Gimel Tammuz proclamation stating, the Rebbe's views on Israel and that the prime minister should be strong and continue to work hard for the Jewish people in Israel and et cetera, et cetera. And then after that, Avi Weinstein, no relation to me, but he is the vice president of Chabad House on Campus International, which is sort of a support organization for all our campuses. So he got up and spoke and addressed, Netanyahu and told him, how important he is doing for the state of Israel, what our mission is, et cetera, et cetera. And then the only other person to really speak to the prime minister was the shliach from Harvard, Rabbi Zarki, because Harvard has gotten a lot of attention with all the craziness going there. And so he basically gave him a lowdown on what was happening. And also, though, just to mention that the Jewish students were rallying together and showing as strong a face as they could. And so the two of them exchanged a few words back and forth, just asking questions and what's the details. And after that, Netanyahu gave us his talk. Again, you might have seen summaries of that. Basically, in a nutshell, he related his first meeting with the Rebbe, which was Simchas Torah, back when he was the UN representative for Israel. And the Rebbe giving him, telling him that he's going into a dark place and he needs to make sure he lights a candle in that dark place. He needs to emanate light in such a place. And the Rebbe gave him a charge of 3 steps. One, Avs Yisrael, one is protecting Jews, protecting Israel, and not showing weakness in front of all the detractors and the enemies of the Jewish people in Israel. And so Netanyahu then turned it around and then sort of said, okay, I got that charge and now I'm handing that off back to you on campus. You're on the front lines, the spiritual front lines. You guys, should have that, follow those same 3 steps and stay strong. And that was the meeting. And then we left and rejoined the Kinnis. But it was just a special moment. And I know I got my, 5 minutes of fame, I guess, and a lot of coverage. So that's sort of the Kinnis. I'd say that the Kinnis in general had a lot of very powerful moments for me, but I think for everybody. Of any Kinnis, the idea is to strengthen ourselves. We're ranked a lot, trying to give each other support, trying to share ideas and whatnot. But we also were in Israel, and so there was a big purpose was to find out what was going on in the state of Israel, to get a sense of how Israelis were looking at the situation right now, and try to give them strength as much as possible in different ways. And then in turn, they were giving us strength and giving us information and maybe the ability to support our students in a stronger way. I can go through day by day and minute by minute and tell you all the different things, and I'm not going to do that. I don't have the time to do that. But I'll touch on highlights. So after we left the prime minister's office, we rejoined the rest of the Kinnis. They happened to have been, they went from Kfar Chabad to a little city near Tel Aviv called Kiryat Ono. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's east of Tel Aviv, near Ramat Gan, that area, and Petach Tikva, that sort of general area. And in Kiryat Ono is a university that supports and actually encourages Haredim to come and learn there. So it's set up in order to be, class friendly, so that they're not mixed sexes in the classroom. It accommodates scheduling, both males and females, but totally separate classrooms, separate everything, and many, many different subjects. So if they want to go into professional fields, here is a way for them to do that, which is kind of an interesting thing. It's unique to have that kind of special consideration. And from there, just a very short distance away is Tel HaShomer, which is where the Shiva hospital is. And there, we met with some wounded soldiers. And for us, we met three male soldiers who had been injured in various ways, from someone who took a direct blast from either a rocket or a grenade or a mortar or something. At that time, he'd already been in the hospital for months. He was an ability where he could walk. He was with a walker to walk. And he still had, he said, about like 100 pieces of shrapnel in his body in various places. And slowly but surely, they were trying to rehabilitate him. His goal was that, you know, his wife was expecting soon with a baby, and his goal was to be able to stand and hold his new baby. That's what his hope was to be. So he's working hard at that. That's just one little vignette. There were three different ones with various issues, all speaking very strongly. You know, they have a lot of determination, and they're not giving up. And so it gave us a lot of strength, just knowing what they're going through. You know, we can then apply. I want to mention that, you know, in the news, if you've been following the news a little bit, just recently, I think it was this week, there was a couple that had been at Nova who's unfortunately, they went into a shelter and the terrorists threw in a grenade, and unfortunately, both of them lost a leg. They just had a wedding. You might have heard about that, right? So the woman, the young lady who just got married, she was in the hospital when my wife was there just a couple of months before, and she got to meet her in the hospital and talking about that from her angle. But it's kind of interesting that, you know, one of the things that we're reading in the family now, just, you know, a different story each day than my story. And so in number 2 is a professor doctor. His name is Shani, Mordechai Shani, and he was the director of this Sheba hospital in Tel Shomer, and the Rebbe giving him advice and you know, things of how to model that hospital to make it more, you know, patient friendly, et cetera. But it's kind of interesting Hashgacha practice that we were just reading that recently. So from there, we then went to Yerushalayim, and before going to our hotel, we went to a place called what is it called? Ohel Hagavura, I think it's called, the hero tent. And there, the families of hostages, the families of fallen soldiers would go and help strengthen each other, get treatments and whatnot. And it happened to be a shliach protest that the day we got there was actually a Haknasa Sefer Torah. That one of the mothers of childhood passed away. There was supposed to be a wedding that day, that actual day for her child, and of course that's not happening. So she instead commissioned a writing of a Sefer Torah, and they actually had the Haknasa Sefer Torah right when we showed up, and so we actually got to join that, and that was very special. Then, you know, from there we went to the hotel. The next day was going down south. And so what we did, we first went down to Sderot, and there we had 3 different things we got to see. One, first stop for us was that we went to where the police station used to be. Right now it's just a space. They're planning to rebuild it, but if you were following details of what was going on there, the terrorists came in and actually killed a number of police officers and took over the police station. And we actually met with one of the police officers who was involved in the battle and saving other people's lives in the city. And he talked about his role. He wasn't inside the police station, but he was outside in part of that conflict there. And so that was very moving. From there, we went to an overlook where you literally were a few hundred yards away from the border of Gaza. And so you can look over and see that particular day, and we saw in the news, you know, many of you probably have the app too. It's this, you know, Israel breaking news. It tells you, you know, what's happening in any given moment. So that particular day, there was a lot of action going on in Gaza City, and we could actually see Gaza City from where we were standing. I mean, it was that close. And we heard booms and all of a sudden smoke pouring out of different buildings and stuff. It was pretty crazy to think that active fighting was going on within eyeshot of where we were. We were on at that point, that's the northeast corner of Gaza. You could see where the border is. You could see where Ashkelon is and how close the border is to Ashkelon and whatnot. So that was just to get a sense of what these people are going through. Literally, as anybody followed the banquet from the Kiddush Shluchim, the little boy who is this son and grandson of the Shluchim there. So he mentioned that, was it 12? He had 12 seconds, I think, was from the time the sirens went to get under a shelter, because that's how fast the rockets were coming in. So we were there, walking the streets there, you could sense how close everything was. And then from there, we went to the Chabad house, and aside from meeting the shliach, we got to meet the mayor of the town. He happens to be a rabbi in a synagogue there, a Sephardic synagogue, and he was caught in the conflict with a life-threatening wound, which Baruch Hashem, he miraculously survived. But he described what was going on with him and what was like, and to hear personal stories is crazy. So again, that just sort of settled things. This was a very serious day for us, very heavy day. So from there, we went down to Nova. Now, I'd been to Israel a number of times back when I learned in Chabad. I was there for a few years, but I'd never been in that little strip. Like the Gaza Strip is on the southwest corner of Israel. I've never drove around there or down the side on the Israel side, but we did that day. And so we could see as we're driving south on our right side, kibbutz after kibbutz or moshav, all the famous names that you heard about when they've been attacked. Gaza was just on the other side of that. So they just came in a massive wave into these places. But what touched me personally, in some ways, is as we're heading down, there was a place where there's an intersection where there's a road to the left teeing into this main road. And right there in the corner of that intersection was kibbutz Sa'ad. Kibbutz Sa'ad is a Sephardic kibbutz, from kibbutz. And so Simchas Torah, they were celebrating Yom Tov, and so everything was closed. The whole fence was completely locked up. And because of that, the terrorists couldn't breach it. And they tried a little bit, but they just didn't spend too much time because I guess either they were told to or it just wasn't working. So they just kept going further south to Nova. But what particularly touched me was looking on the map, right next to Saad on the other side was a moshav called Shuva, which is also spared because the terrorists didn't proceed around and over, they just kept going south. So Shuva happens to be the location where one of our alumni live right now, which was, brought it home very, personally. But Baruch Hashem, when I texted him right away, he said, Baruch Hashem, his moshav was completely saved because they didn't bother. Once Saad sort of, set up, they couldn't penetrate that. They just kept going and didn't go further, which was very fortunate. Nova was, again, very touching. We met a guy named Oren, who was someone who rescued hundreds of people from that festival. Whoever could run away, they were spreading it all over the directions. If they made it out and they were hiding behind bushes and wherever they were hiding, this guy lived nearby and he got the word that something was going on. So he and his father-in-law jumped into an equivalent of one of these little, worker trucks. It's like a minivan sort of thing, more than a minivan, like a minibus, and drove it in and just grabbed as many people as he could and drove them to safety, kept coming in and out the whole day, risking their own lives because they didn't know what was behind this next corner or behind this whatever. And the very last person they picked up that day, they got a word that there was someone who was hiding under some bush near another intersection, which the terrorists had taken over at the time. He and three others got in his car, were driving away as fast as they could, but unfortunately, the intersection where they had to pass through was where Hamas was, and so bullets were spraying all into the car, and unfortunately, two of the four were killed instantly. He and the other guy were injured. I mean, seriously. I mean, it was a lot of bleeding, so it could have been life-threatening, very quickly. But they managed to get past them, kept driving, and then crawled under some bushy area and threw stuff on top of themselves and just waited for hours. Meanwhile, trying to text out, we're here, somebody find us. So this guy came in and actually picked them up. And we actually heard from both of them, the victim and this guy who saved him, and talked about their stories. And again, it's a show of not just the terror, that wasn't the point, but the resilience of these people was really, really powerful for us. I mean, they were able to, first of all, talk about it very candidly and show that they're still living and they're still willing to move forward, et cetera. And again, I don't know what you've seen, but there was videos put out, with us putting them on their shoulders and dancing around with them and whatnot. But that was an intensive day. So then it continued. From there, we went up to the Shomron, that's Samaria, up in the northeast, went to an army base, and on campus arranged to have a barbecue for these soldiers and their families. This was in a little town called Alei Zahav. If anybody knows the Shomron, it's not far from Ariel. And near this little town is where the army base was. So the army group came to this little town, and there's a park, and we set up the whole barbecue and everything there for them. And you got to meet many of them and talk to them, and just hearing their stories. And then they heard, they were worried about us and how we on campus are having to deal with it, because the word gets out, that we're going through craziness. We're worried about them. They're worried about us. It's very interesting how we're sharing. If I can just share two things. One is sort of a serious thing, and one was one of the most the most memorable and special things that for me in that whole kinnis. So the soldiers, the more serious one is the soldiers told us that a couple of days before October 7th, this is Chol Hamoed Sukkos. So they were on the base. Oh, by the way, this base, these soldiers are like the military Chevra Kadisha. So they're not the ones on the front lines, but they're the ones, whenever there's a fallen soldier, they're the ones who have to deal with the body. And we're not talking about, it's bad enough when someone passes away and they have to just purify the body, but we're talking about results of an army action. You don't have to go to the details, but it's they have to be sort of Zaka and Hever Kadisha at the same time, kind of thing. So they said, this was a couple of days before, this all happened. They said, we should do a practice, a crazy practice, like sort of unheard of. But how about if we practice, if 6 people would, fallen soldiers would come in at exactly the same time, how would we, as a unit, split up and deal with 6 simultaneous, bodies? And 2 days later, they got 100 people show, unfortunately. I mean, that's how crazy it was. So they were, even though they hadn't faced bullets and stuff, it was a struggle for them. So now we're interacting with them and talking to them. The announcement was made. Every session we had, some campus shliach got up and did some introduction for whatever it was. So this one gets up and talks about how happy we're here to be able to meet the soldiers and support them, etc. Then he says, "As a special, thing and a gift to the soldiers, I now want to introduce you to Ishai Rebo." So Ishai Rebo shows up with his band and has a private concert with us. Now this is sort of after my time kind of entertainment, but all my kids, love him. He's like a rock star in Israel. I mean, some of my kids, my adult kids, paid like $100 to be up high in the bleachers to be able to see him in a concert. Here he is, as he's standing as far as I am to the wall right there, and he's dancing. And then he jumps off the stage and he's dancing with us and singing all the famous songs that, if you don't know the songs, your kids know the songs. It's one of these famous things, and it was really, really special that he would come and do that. And so in the middle of all that, of course, immediately once the music started, the campus shluchim were grabbing all the soldiers and anybody else we can get in the middle, and we're dancing with them all, and it's a really special thing. One shliach in particular, after he grabbed everybody he could in an army uniform, he was looking for anybody else to grab. So again, this is in a park, and a little like a playground kind of park. And on the other side of the park from where we are, it's on a hill. So just on the edge of the hill, there's a few, I guess, apartments or something up there. And there was a number of kids. So we ran up to try to grab some of the kids. Must have been kids from, soldiers or whatever. Grab kids to bring him in. And he went to one child, must have been 6 or 8 years old, I don't know. And so he spoke in Hebrew, "Hey, come on, let me dance." And he was a little hesitant. His mother was standing there. He felt like he wanted to, but he didn't really want to. So he says, "I'll tell you what, I'll put you on my shoulder. Will you come?" He says, "Okay." So he put him on the shoulder and ran back down the hill and started dancing, and literally took the kid face to face with Ishai Rebo. I mean, you're making a tight circle like this, and he's literally 2 feet away from it. This kid was beaming. And so after the dancing was over, he walks him back up the hill and drops him off to his mother. And his mother's like teary-eyed, emotionally. She said to the shliach, "You have no idea what you just did. No idea." She said, "My husband, his father, was killed on October 7th. And we had to move out. And so we moved in with my husband's brother's family. That's where we are right now. And the husband's brother is now, he was also sent right into the action in Gaza, and he's still there as of this time we're there." And so she said, "My little son every day stands by the door waiting that maybe one day his uncle will show up for dinner, or he half was expecting another, army group walking up like it happened to his family, saying his uncle's no longer with them. And she said since October 7th, and this is months later, we're talking about 8 months later, has never had a smile on his face once, not once. You today put a smile on his face like never before. You have no idea how you helped my son. It's like, oh, I mean, that made the whole, for us, I mean, that was like, if that's all we did, that was it. But, Baruch Hashem, we were able to, dance and sing with a lot of the soldiers and the families and whatnot. And a number of us brought candies and snacks. And so we were handing them out to the families and the kids. And, it was just a very special moment. So that was all, that was Thursday, dealing with that issue. So as far as the kinnis is concerned, I guess, the Shabbos was just for bring-ins, nonstop for bring-ins. We first went to the Kotel. We got there early and we set up, and there was 200 plus of us, and we always had to say the Nigunim, which attracted a lot of attention to around whoever's, even the people in the homes, in the old city who had balconies were all looking at us, listening. And we davened there and then walked all the way back to the hotel, which is about about an hour walk away. The Ramada Hotel where we stayed is on the other side of the main bus station in Kiryat Moshe, if that means anything to anybody, next to Givat Shaul. So that's where the hotel was. So we had a long walk back, but it was very special. And for meal and for bring-ins that night until whenever, all of Shabbos was just for bring-ins. For me, a personal thing was Hashachar Pratis. If anybody remembers the Fort family, Yosef Fort, yeah, his mother still lives here and has a brother here and whatnot. So Yosef Fort celebrated the bar mitzvah of his oldest son on that Shabbos, Hashachar Pratis. So myself and Yitzi Krieger walked. It was only a 10-minute walk. We walked over to that little Chabad house shul where they were, and then celebrated the bar mitzvah with them. That was a personal highlight. And then came back to the hotel, and then for Brang again the whole rest of the day. And at night, we had Malava Malka and Natan Sharansky. For all those older people here, the younger people probably don't even know what I'm talking about when I say Natan Sharansky. Anatoly Sharansky, he was a refusnik early on in Russia, and he's like the poster child for all the refuseniks in some ways. And so when he was finally released and went to Israel, and he became, it became observant and involved in politics and whatnot. So he came and spoke, being a refusnik and knowing what struggle was. So he spoke to us. Then the Sunday, I guess this is the last day of the Kinnis. We went to Cover Rachel, and that's always powerful. And there we actually met the parents of a current hostage, an American hostage. A guy named John Poland spoke to us. Their son is Goldberg Poland, if you know the name. He was famous because unfortunately he was the one whose arm was blown off, and then they had a video of him there and being carried off alive. So as far as they know, he's still alive. There's no indication he's otherwise. But so the parents spoke to us then. There's a bit of a Pittsburgh connection there because, yeah.
She rich Rabbi Yaakov.
This is the same one. Yeah, right.
And rich, she was the member way back. So he has a personal connection with her.
Exactly. Yes, I'll say it for the people here. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So Rabbi Yalkod here is a rabbi here at PZ. So he used to be in Richmond, Virginia as a rabbi, and this family used to be a part of that congregation. So he knows them all personally. So that was, a personal touch here. So we went there, and then after that, we went to Hebron and got to see the Chabad house there. We got to see the Maris Machpelah. It didn't affect us because we were having a really nice meal in the Chabad house at that time, being, talked to, by the shliach there, Danny Cohen. But that day, just hundreds of feet away, there was a woman and two children, Arab, who came up, and at the checkpoint, they discovered a knife on her, and she was planning to do something. So that happened right outside our door, so to speak. It's going on a lot. So after that, a highlight for me was, I've been to Machpelah a number of times in Hebron, but I'd never been through the Jewish area. And so we took a walking tour with another shliach. His name is Mordechai Hellinger. And we started from the Chabad house pretty much and walked through the streets, the one street we're allowed to walk through, past all these famous sites. If you know the history of Hebron, like Beit Hadassah and a few other places like that, the yeshiva that the Rebbe Rashab actually purchased and still under, owned by Chabad. Walked past there all the way. The road took us up the hill to the kever of Menucha Rachel, who is the daughter of the middle Rebbe. Her married last name was Slonim. And so we went there and davened. But that walk through and hearing the history and knowing what's going on there, that was a personal highlight for me. Then after that, we were taken to a banquet near the airport. There's some convention center-y kind of place. I don't remember the name, but that was special. And we actually got to hear some different stories from both American shluchim and how they're dealing with the current situation and also what's going on with the Israeli shluchim. I mean, just as a highlight, one of them who got up and spoke, he's up near Afula. There's a university up there. And he, of course, campus is a little different because the students are all older. People go to the army first, and after the army, then they go to universities. They're typically 3 to 4 years older than students that we deal with here. And as soon as as soon as October 7th happened, all of a sudden people were called up and whatever, and regulars at his Chabad house now took off to suddenly be a part of the fighting. And so he said his Chabad house suddenly changed because now he still had a core of people there who weren't currently being called up. But suddenly now, and the students asked for this, they wanted to do something to help support everybody. So they organized, and every single week, once a week, the students and he would go to an army base. And every week, a different army base. He said as of the time he spoke to us, it was 100 and something, I forget how many army bases. Each one was a different time. And he went around just giving them strength and, singing and dancing with them, giving them food, etc., just to give them strength. And then he said, all of a sudden one day, one of the students called up and says, "You got to come to campus quick. There's families showing up." And these are people who were up in the north who were displaced because of the rockets and stuff in the north. And so one of the places they were told to go is showing up at this university. I guess they had dormitory space that now house families. I'm not sure. Something like that. So now he became not only a Chabad house for students, he became a Chabad house to help these people and their daily needs, from everything from toothbrushes to getting food, just to making them feel comfortable and whatever. It's just a whole different scene there. That I guess was the highlights of the. I mean, I could go on and on with more things, but those are some of the highlights of what happened. Personally, a very special thing that happened while I was on the trip. And I heard this only maybe 2 weeks before I left for Israel. The student who was the very first student to ever show up in a Chabad house event for us in 1988 when we first moved here, which was Rosh Hashanah meal. One student showed up, and that student, who was a Pittsburgher, Treblo family, Michael Treblo back then, now Michael Treblo. Baruch Hashem, he's a rabbi now. He's has a family living in Manchester, England, and he was marrying off his first child in Manchester. And he told me that he was doing it, assuming that I would just wish him mazel tov, because, flying to England would be, from America. But this was the day after our kinnis. And so I quickly arranged it. So from Israel, instead of going back to America, I went to England and got to dance at a chasana, a very special chasana. So that was, again, a personal highlight of what was going on there. I can right now we have another 15 minutes. I can do one of two things. You can ask questions and we can just sort of share different things. It happened to be because of the way things worked out. I mentioned to you, my wife had her kinnis also in Israel, but earlier, this was a couple of days after Lag BaOmer. They returned just before Shavuos. And so the two of us decided, we hadn't seen our alumni since after October 7th, and we have a number of them. To give it an example of the extent of it, when in 2018, we took administrators to Israel on a special trip. You might have heard me tell you that story before. So part of that was a reunion, so that the administrators could see these graduates from Pitt and CMU who are now made Aliyah and they're living in Israel. And so about 70 people showed up to that reunion. And that's not even everybody who was there. And so we have a lot of people there. That's why I mentioned it. And so we wanted to visit these alumni. We wanted to say hi, give them strength, just be there for them a little bit. So the question was, my wife was going for her kinnis. I went for my kinnis. Now, would I then, in addition to that, go to Israel with her for her kinnis? And so while she was doing things, I would visit alumni. And then afterwards, we would stay an extra week and visit more alumni. Or would she come and do the same thing at mine? So the decision was mainly financial because the plane tickets were a lot cheaper back in May. So I flew at the same time she did. And so while she was in her kinnis, experiencing amazing things, I was running around the country, going to visit people who would not have come to a reunion otherwise, say in Tel Aviv, Yerushalayim, and places that she may not have wanted me to travel herself anyway. So I can share if anybody remembers Saul who's here. He's a Pittsburgh. So if you've heard stories of what goes on in Hebron and the craziness there, they're like 40 minutes even further out. They're on a hilltop, literally. It's called, to live there takes a certain determination, let's say. It's really kind of crazy. But he made the comment though. He said, I try to invite people to come here and spend Shabbos with us. And they go, are you kidding me? Where you are? Why would we want to do that? He says, well, let me ask you a question. This particular person he mentioned lived in Yerushalayim. He says, Yerushalayim, how many terror attacks happened in Yerushalayim last year? It was about, 15 or so. He says, well, you know how many terror attacks happened here? 0. It's just, you're going to be safer here than in Yerushalayim. Anyway, but so I got to travel a little bit and see, different people like that we wouldn't have otherwise gone together and see. It was kind of a whirlwind for that too. But I can open it up if anybody has a particular question or a comment or something. I can tell you more details, more different things that happen if that's of interest to you or however that works. But maybe we can open up. Yeah.
It's in Jerusalem, city itself is sort of desolate, especially from tourists. Did you see that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, that's a good point. So Yerushalayim now is very empty, relatively speaking, as far as tourists are concerned. It did when we were there in May, and also even when I was, just there, in was it July-ish time. So usually that's full of Birthright Israel trips. There's lots of summer camp trips. There's all kinds of things like that. The streets were relatively empty. The hotel when we were there, normally on a Friday night at that time of year, you could hardly move. It'd be packed. This was not so packed. We had 200 people there to pack our little area, but the hotel was relatively empty, actually. There were a lot of signs up in Hebrew because the tourists and because people aren't coming for the summer and whatnot. In Hebrew, there was a lot of signs saying, for rent, apartments, things that you wouldn't see on Airbnb or whatever. These are people who want somebody to come and stay there for a while. So that is it's a good point, and it is something that we did notice. And it was kind of sad, but sort of a reality. I understand, while we were there, rockets were flying, nothing anywhere close to us, but things were happening. It wasn't quiet everywhere. And as I said, when we were at Gaza, things were happening all over the place in Gaza, and Hamas was and is still even firing rockets into Israel. Not as many as they were before, but they are, and of course Hezbollah in the north now. So things are, a little, the energy, there's still people, on a Thursday night now, if you go on a Thursday night, the young people, used to be Ben Yehuda Street. Now the young people go to the Shuk, the Machane Yehuda Shuk, the food stands close up. And then in there is also lots of bars and restaurants, and that opens up. And Thursday night is their big party night. And so, people were still there. I passed by on Thursday night and there were a bunch of people there, but you could sense that the energy level was ratcheted down a little bit. They were still celebrating. There's still, the whatever, but not quite the same level of excitement.
When you did tour or move around, do you have an armed guard with you?
Oh, yeah, we had armed guard for this the entire time. Yeah, just for our own safety. Again, it wasn't. I wouldn't say that it was so necessary most of the time. But before we went anywhere, the what do they call it? The home. It's like Homeland Security equivalent. I forgot what they call it in Israel. The security people, they checked out every place we went before we went there, so that if something had to be changed, we would know that we had to go here as opposed to there if something was acting up, and so that wasn't a concern so much. I mean, we were in recovery, and we actually had army escort the whole way, just to make sure. But we. Right, Chris. So the question is that during this Knesset, there's a lot of seeing Israelis, but were there also sessions where talks and discussions how we're to prepare ourselves on these campuses here for the fall? So yes, there was that. There was against that. There's Campus International, which is this big support organization for all the campus from around the world. And by the way, I should just mention, I didn't officially mention it, but this Kines was the largest men's Kines of campus since they started these things. And there was 14 countries represented. So the US, Canada, Mexico, of course, Russia. I think that's it. So there's a lot of people from a lot of different places and all, at different levels, different degrees of experience and whatever is going on. And different people were sharing, it wasn't all just a speaker getting up and talking, but it was a lot of interaction going on. And this, so the Campus International, they have a whole organization within them called the Advocacy on Campus Task Force, which is here to support when things do get crazy. This last campuses needed their help in different ways. He was right on campus where the White House is, but he didn't realize when he moved there a number of years ago that now that place became known as Little Palestine. And so literally hours after, on Simchas Torah, the very end of Simchas Torah, and the day after in particular, afterwards, there were already people driving by his house, making noise, taking pictures of the house, shouting things. This is in the University of South Florida. Yeah. And so he actually had to he needs 24/7 security around his home in the White House. And so White House and Campus International helped figure out ways of protecting that. I'll just share with you an interesting thing with that, because it wasn't getting like everybody else, like, what am I supposed to do to most effectively deal with this situation, right? Not just with us, but our students and whatever. And so, personally, there's all the questions that come up. So he just remembers, he shared with us, he remembered that when he was considering which campus to go to, he had like four options, real options to consider, 4 campuses. So he went to the OHEL and presented it to the Rebbe. And when it came out, like many people do, he went in the front. I show punches that moment. And at that moment, he walked in. It was actually, I don't know if it was a kids rally or an Shea event or something, but the Rebbe's walking up steps to the platform where the Rebbe sat. And right there was a little girl and the mother next to her. And he looked at the picture and it was, oh my goodness. That picture was his wife as a little girl. That video, that was his wife's little girl, and that was his mother-in-law standing there. Okay, whoa, okay. And he said that they had only been to the Rebbe once. They lived in England. They're British. And that's the only time they ever went to such an event like that. And there, boom, that was what he saw. So now, okay, there's a message here. Something's going on, right? So right after that, it quickly switched to a dollars line. And the head shlucha of Tampa, this is where in South Florida, University of Florida in Tampa. So the head shlucha of Tampa walked right by the Rebbe, right there at that dollars line. And the Rebbe gives her $2 and says, this is for your entire Meisid. And that's not usually in normal Lashon. He didn't say this is for your Meisid, this is for your Chabad house. This is for the entire. So he got the message, okay, this is where he needs to be. So that was the decision made, and that's why he moved to South Florida. And so he remembered that and said, you know what? we're not vacating a shlichus here. So instead, he decided he's going to crank up the energy and start doing more and more classes and more things and et cetera, et cetera. And he has a whole mezuzah campaign to put up 100 new mezuzahs on campus. Students who would be willing to do that, whatever he said at the time, he was 80 something. We're here and we're not going to give in. We're going to be strong Jews and and support the Jews on campus. So that those messages were coming through. There's the seriousness, but also there's resiliency and there's the determination, and we're all feeding off each other in different ways of things that happened and what's going on. So that was definitely part of the kinnis. What's going to happen in the fall? We don't know. But I don't think it's going away unless, we have the gula. As soon as the gula happens, of course, it's all going away. We have a totally different picture, right? But Al B'Teva, if it's going to continue up into the fall, even knowing this was what happened in Pittsburgh, you guys were all aware, if you follow the news, there was 2 encampments we had at Pittsburgh, at the University of Pittsburgh. First one was on Pesach, and that was a minor one. That was, they were first on campus and then quickly moved over to Shanley Plaza, which is the city property. And they set up all their tents and, all this interesting how all the tents looked like they were all the same tents from the same maker, whatever, all spontaneous, of course. But there were the signs or whatever, but it was relatively quiet, meaning they weren't coming out of their encampment and yelling and screaming at people like other places have seen. They were in there just presenting their ugly signs and whatever. But the second one was more aggressive on their part. I assume people know this. What? Yeah, the cathedral, right. And that ended with the mayor at 2 a.m. because the state police were already staging, behind them. And the mayor came in early in the morning and said something to them, and they packed up and left. So I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means for the fall. But we're assuming that we're going to be cranking up our efforts to make sure that we're going to keep our Jews, safe and feeling positive about who they are. But anyway, yeah. So any other? We have. Well, it's 9:30 officially. This is it ends here. But yeah. So those are some highlights, and Israel's still strong. Things are, if you follow the news, things are. The dynamics are getting more complex over there, and who knows what the future is going to be, the immediate future. But we need to stay strong. We definitely got that feeling when we went there and came back inspired to really make a difference on our campuses. Thank you. I think we need to because they've already davened Marvin there, haven't they? They davened at like 10 after or something. Do we have 10 people to make the minyan? Yeah. Pfeffer.